There's an interesting parallel because when Laurie goes to Vienna, then he goes to Varosa to be with Amy, and it shows this gradual growth process that he has. And then Joe has the similar growth process in New York. So in a way, their stories parallel in part 2. And I think,
Yeah, they're good foils for each other.
yeah, so that is completely missed in 99% of Little Women adaptations.
Yeah, I think there's just not enough time because they try to cram this big complicated book, which is actually 2 books, into at most 4 hours of a miniseries.
And I feel that some of them don't even read the book.
Oh, it does seem like it. Or they read with a specific lens they're looking through. They want it to say something, so they pick up on the parts that reinforce what they think and ignore the parts that tell a different story. Maybe they read it as a kid and this is what they remember.
Exactly. Or I think some people use the book only as like an extra guide to the movies. That's a bit weird, but I come across people who do that.
Yeah, that could be a big part of it too, because the movies are definitely different from the books.
I was wondering, do you know a lot about Anna Alcott, the real life Meg?
I know a little bit about her, but not as much as I would know about, Louisa or May, even Lizzie, I guess, or what's the dad's name? Bronson. I don't know a lot about Anna except that her real husband got along pretty well with Louisa, and he was in part the model for John, is something I've heard.
We talked about the age gaps. Anna Alcott was actually 1 year older than John Bratt. And I thought that was interesting. Because in the book, there is the age gap.
Right. I wonder why. I guess because she wanted to make him tutor of the Lawrences. That's an interesting change.
John Pratt was like a lawyer or a banker.
Okay.
I don't really remember. Maybe because Louisa May Alcott like teachers. Maybe that's why John is a teacher.
Well, maybe because her father was a teacher.
Yeah, and then there was Emerson and other big philosophers in her life. John does become like a secretary for the Lawrences later on when Laurie is graduating. He doesn't need tutor anymore. So John continues to work for the Lawrences, but in a different position.
She was able to combine those ideas.
One of the things that I liked in your book was this warm relationship between older Mr. Lawrence and John.
I really liked Mr. Lawrence in the 99% of the adaptations. I can't think of one I didn't like. I just always thought he was a great character, and I wanted to kind of show that in my books and kind of have the mentor figure that John didn't have in his life. The stable kind of father, grandfatherly figure.
In the original, he's written to be more of a philanthropist, even though he's very wealthy. And when Beth becomes ill, he's the one who calls the doctor, now his own doctor,
to come in and help. Yeah. And he also is the one that sends John with Marmee to kind of help her out when she's in Washington.
Yeah, with Father March
when he's third.
Yeah, Mr. Lawrence. It's almost like he works in the background helping everyone.
Mm-hmm. Also, how when they give up their breakfast to the poor family, and then they come home and he's seen what they did and thought that was really neat. And so he gives them a feast that's even grander than what they had in the first place. I think he recognized that generosity, and it's something that obviously he likes to be the philanthropist, and that was kind of their small way of the same, and he wanted to give to them since they'd given to others. And they always say, I've gotten the impression that they gave Laurie the credit. Oh, it's his grandson must have talked him into it. And I don't think so. I think it was him the whole time.
True.
He was always that. John was more quiet about things, not as flashy. So he kind of quietly did stuff like that in the background, like you said. I think it was all him.
I once read that Emerson was maybe the real life Mr. Lawrence.
Okay.
Because he financially helped the Alcotts a lot. I don't know, maybe.
Or at least parts of him.
Well, some say he was also model for Friedrich.
Yeah.
I think because Emerson allowed Louisa to borrow books from his library.
Hello, friends. It is Niina from the Little Woman podcast. Just to let you all know that the Little Woman podcast episode transcripts are now available as books. You can find them as paperbacks and ebooks. They are wonderful reading for all the fans of Louisa May Alcott. You can find all the links from the description. And now, back to the show.
So definitely is something that Fred does with Joe.
Well, a lot of times when you write, you might get ideas for a character from various experiences in real life, or you might change some things, or combine two characters into one, or take a couple things from someone you know and give parts of them to different characters. It wouldn't surprise me if that part of him was something that made an impression on her, and then she used it, whether she knew it or not. Sometimes it's just, the way you were brought up and the way, you might not even consciously know, I'm going to base this aspect of this character on my neighbor. And it might just be something that made an impact on you, and then it comes out in this creative way.
Frederick is he's a mixed character, same as Laurie. I just like to make these connections with these real life people.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Well, real life people definitely influence the way you see the world, and that's the way your art is going to come out.
There's some things that I thought were quite funny in Anna Alcott, like that Louisa didn't really like fan mail, but Anna always replied to the fan mail. Then she would write that this from the real life Meg March. And that
that's funny.
She had a really neat handwriting when you couldn't always read. If Louis had written something, she had very messy handwriting. But Anna's handwriting is very neat.
Doesn't that totally sound like a Meg and Joe thing?
Yes. May Alcott's handwriting is very artistic, very pretty. And then Anna Alcott, it's very neat and punctual. I thought that was funny.
That is funny. Yeah. And then Louisa's is crazy creative all over the place, messy.
Yeah.
That is funny.
I really want to do more research on Anna Alcott because I think Meg is sort of labeled as not very artistic like the other sisters. But I think there are many different layers in Meg's character.
A lot of people will be like, oh, she's the boring one. She's just the one that gets older and has a family, and she's the mom. But there's a lot of interesting things about her and about their relationship, too. In Good Wives, we see them, different parenting styles, having to navigate that, being exhausted from having young children and still working on your relationship. The worst my husband and I ever argued was when our son was little and he was a kid who woke up every hour on the hour. We were both exhausted. You're a different person when you're so tired, and then you kind of explore those things. And what do you do when your husband invites someone over and you're not ready and things are kind of a disaster? That happens nowadays in real life. The house is a mess and in comes the person invited for dinner. They kind of explored that stuff too. And
I think it's quite amazing in Little Woman how it goes from these different ages of human life in very nuanced ways. I think we talked about this last time, how we identify ourselves with Meg now more than we did when we were younger. We identify ourselves with Meg now because we are more mature. And it's funny because when I was younger, I couldn't really identify with her. Same way like I did with Beth or with Joe. But I think now I can see a lot of myself in Meg.
When I was a kid, I probably identified best with Beth because I was quieter and always wanted to be around pets, especially cats. And Beth always had the cat in the cartoon. Just wasn't really like Joe. I wasn't outgoing. But then in high school and young adulthood, it was Joe who I identified with because I loved to write and I wanted to be a writer and be creative. And now, as I'm older, it's probably more Meg that I identify with because she's a mom and a stay-at-home. Everyone basically stayed at home. A lot of women, although not in Little Women because they had to go out and help support their family, but family was the center of her world, and that's kind of where I'm at. I'm not sure when or if I'll ever identify with Amy, but we'll see. Although I do like Amy. She's a fun character. A lot of people think you have to hate Amy if you like Joe, but I don't think so. I like both.
I don't think I have a favorite sister.
No, I think I've gone through times of my life when I have had favorite sisters, but now I think I kind of just like the whole unit, the March family as a unit, because if you didn't have one, they would be so different, the rest of them, and the whole family and the relationships that make the story.
When I was a child, Beth was also my favorite character because I had really bad social anxiety. So I relate to that. But then later on, I really liked Joe and Amy because they were the artistic ones. But now I think I identify with Meg, so it's funny. I think Fredrik is my favorite character.
Oh, he's a great character.
But it's because I had a crush on him.
Oh,
from a very young age.
Did you have a crush on one of the actors or the character?
Both.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. And I also really like Laurie. And there are people who say that you cannot like Laurie and like Fredrik. I don't really see why.
You can like both.
I like John too. I like Laurie, but I don't like Laurie in a romantic way. I think he's great with Amy.
There's a lot of characters to really love. You know, Mr. Lawrence and Marmee and Aunt March in her own way.
I really love the scene in your book with Aunt March coming in the end, shouting at Meg that she should not be with John because John is Laura. And I was laughing so hard because it is such a funny scene. It's a really funny scene in the book as well.
And in all the movies, when she just like bustles in there and is like, you blah, 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 blah. And then that's really the catalyst for Meg actually realizing she does on it.
1949 film. That's pretty cool. It's the book when she goes to the March house and then I think John had forgot his umbrella there. So he hears everything that she says. That's also in the book. And she is like, you cannot marry that poor guy. It was so funny.
It backfires on her.
Yeah. I don't think they really put that to the others. There's like Aunt March complaining that Meg wants to be with the poor guy, but it's so much funnier when she comes to rant about it and then Meg goes to defend him.
And it's funny that before she comes, Meg is just kind of like, oh no, I don't think I will marry this guy. And then, so it totally backfires on her. She's complaining about him. And then that's when Meg kind of stands up for him, like you said. She also reminds herself of all his great qualities. And Aunt March never should have said anything, I guess. That's what she wanted it to go like.
How old she was? She was 17 when that happened. That's in the first part of Little Woman.
That's like the end of the first
Yeah.
part, right? Yeah, that's quite towards the end, because then we have Joe being all pouty because Meg is going to get married, and then they're all together, and that's kind of where it ends, I think. And then it goes into Good Wives.
Yeah, that's another thing that's really interesting because when Anna got engaged, Louisa was upset, but it was because their sister Lizzie had died only a month before that. And she was afraid that if Anna would get married, she would have lost 2 sisters. And then May, I believe, was planning to move to Europe. So all her sisters were leaving.
Right.
So I think there's a lot more context in the original story than in Little Woman. Why
she would be so upset.
Yeah. Because a lot of people wonder why she's so upset. Well, I think the original historical story actually explains it much better.
Yeah. Because Beth doesn't die until much later in the book. So it does seem kind of irrational that what did people do back then? They grew up and got married and went off to their own households, It shouldn't have been something that was that traumatic or surprising to Jo, but yeah, that's interesting that it all happened after Lizzie had died. And that's probably where Louisa's mindset was as she was writing this, but I didn't know that.
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago that I found out this myself. Apparently, their mother was also quite not so happy that they decided to get engaged that soon after Lizzie had died.
Oh.
But I think it was also because Anna was already 32 when that happened. If she was 32 when she married, that was a pretty late age to get married in 1963.
Maybe that's why she didn't want to wait.
Yeah, I think so too.
Her sister had died.
And I want to make a very big research about this because it's really interesting.
Did they have kids in real life?
Yeah, they had 2 boys.
Okay.
And the other one was Louisa's favorite nephew. And I read one speculation that maybe he was inspiration for Frederick's nephew Franz, who is Jo's favorite.
That would make sense.
Yeah. Or maybe Demi, who is like Meg's and John's son. Because they had 2 daughters and a son. I kind of like that because Franz and Jo have a really nice relationship. Yeah, maybe she wanted to get married soon because she was pretty old.
Yeah, back for those times. Yeah.
I'm 34 and I'm not in a hurry to get married. Like back in the days when life expectancy was like 40 years or lower.
That's a big part of it too. We have time to do stuff.
I also understand Louisa because you have one sister dead, then second one wants to move abroad. You probably never see her again. Because if she lives in another continent, and then your older sister wants to get married and where she is going to. So I understand that.
Yeah, it does. It makes a little more sense to know what was happening in Louisa's real life.
Wedding should be a happy thing. Like she does writes that she really liked John Pratt and he became more like a brother to her. And she always wanted to have a brother.
Yeah, maybe she realized it was a good thing.
Like Jo really does ends up like John in the sequels. I had this headcanon that in Little Woman, Friedrich was John's best friend because John spoke German. I think I told you this last time.
Oh, that sounds like it would be. That sounds like it would happen. I think they would have been friends.
Of course, he liked Laurie, but Laurie was a lot younger, so you can't really have that similar experience with him.
More Little Women adaptations.
Next season, I want to read some like male Bond fan fictions. If I can find them anywhere. You don't really see that in the movies, like the male characters' friendship that much. Like we can see John teaching Laurie, but we don't really see them interact as adults.
It's always about the sisters.
Yeah.
So.
Or Frederick interacting with Laurie or with John, or sometimes we see Frederick with Jo's parents.
Yeah. And we do see a little bit of them older interacting in like Little Men, but not a ton, but there's a little bit of that.
Another really funny scene that really made me laugh in your book was the part where she was taking a compost bag, and then she was ranting about Amy. And then John was like, that was a bit scary. But that's really funny.
Yeah, I always kind of wonder, he was probably a little intimidated by some of those sisters.
Jo can be a bit scary sometimes, I think.
Yeah.
That's because she cannot always control the things that she says.
Right.
It just stares out.
The temper and the passion and the artist way of just throwing it all out there. And yeah, that was fun to write. I liked writing from the perspective of the guys too, because you don't really know what were they thinking. So that was kind of fun. What would you think when you are this kind of introvert, bookish guy and come into this family with all the sisters that are, fighting or laughing together, or Jo being mad at Amy for something and quite vocal about it? What would that feel like? I really liked getting to do all the viewpoints.
Yeah, that is true. It's really nice to see that, because in the original book, I think there are a few moments when you see bits of John's point of view when he and Meg are married. He struggles to understand some of the things that Meg does. But I think that's normal if you are in a new relationship. The argument about the fabric.
When Sally's kind of like, oh, buy it. So she did. And they kind of have the little argument, yeah.
Then there's Laurie's point of view when he was in love with Amy.
Mm-hmm.
But not really much before that.
No, there's really not.
And then there is Felix's point of view when he falls in love with Jo. But I always like to point out that Jo and Laurie shippers, who sometimes like to troll me, that try to look a scene from The Old Woman where Laurie is thinking Jo romantically, because there is none.
No. It really is kind of out of the blue. Well, it must not have been too out of the blue for her, because she's like worried about it earlier in the book. To me, as a viewer, it's out of the blue.
I think it kind of shows that he wasn't really thinking about it, because when he's writing the opera for Jo, there's this moment when he doesn't really care who the leading character of his opera is going to be. So it feels like he didn't really care who he was going to marry. He just wanted to be married.
Yeah, it does. It does seem like that. And all of a sudden, he's thinking of Amy.
Yeah. I think he was pinning on Jo because Jo was so familiar. So he thought maybe life with Jo would be easy because we have so much fun together.
Probably.
Yeah, something like that. Would you like to tell me how you name your characters?
Well, I tried to kind of make them similar too, but not quite the same names. Most of them are pretty obvious. Some of them needed to be a little modernized, but most of them it's just a form of what Louisa had. Maybe Belle was Bella, and there was a Clara who I made Claire. Just little changes basically, but Megan instead of Margaret, and
you can still recognize them.
Yeah.
I think that's the main point. Do you have any literal inspirations for young adult books?
I do. I like a lot of different young adult authors. As far as the sweet romance goes, my favorite is probably Judy Corey. She writes a lot of really good YA with a little more substance to them than just the romantic couple. They're always kind of dealing with other things too within the romance. And so I really like her books. She was one of the first sweet romance authors I read a few years ago when I was trying to get into the genre, and I still really, really like hers. I do like Judy Corey. I like Emma St. Clair, but she's more adult than YA. But I do like her sweet romance. Yeah, I'm kind of not good at pulling names out. I can look through my Kindle and be like, oh, that book. But as an author, I should be better at that, but I'm not. I think it's because I read so much that it all just kind of blends together.
You're a big reader.
Yeah.
I try to be. I think I have these like waves when I read a lot, then I don't read much, and then I read a lot again. It comes and goes.
The things that I see you posting about reading are in English. So does it take you longer to read in English than it does?
It kind of depends on what I'm reading.
Okay.
It's funny because I think I'm really slow reading fiction in English.
Okay.
Like I can read like academic text very easily in English, like biographies and stuff. But then if I read fiction in English, it's really much slower. I don't know why.
That seems like it would be the opposite.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. I can't read in any other language, so I respect people who can read and speak multiple languages.
I read lots of fiction in Finnish, but when I read fiction in English, it can be very difficult to understand the storyline because I don't really understand all the concepts in fiction related. Maybe that's
because different. I guess in academic, there's a certain way of writing.
Yes,
academically, which is across the board, whether you're from whatever, Florida or Minnesota. But when you're writing about different people in different parts of the United States, maybe they use different slang or they just talk differently. Maybe that's it.
Like it's easy for me to read Little Woman in English because I have studied so much. But like reading some other series in English, it might not be that easy because I don't know that word. So there might be concepts that I don't get. Like I was trying to read Jane Austen in English and I really struggled with it.
Okay.
Because it has its own world. Yeah, it's interesting, but that's the way it is.
That is interesting, yeah.
I think one of the things that I liked about in your book is the way you described the Lawrence house in the way it would be in modern day. It's very impressed already in the original book, and then compared to the March house, which like everything is pretty close there, which also shows how they are very close as a family. And then the Lawrence house, it's big and it's empty,
right?
And it has these beautiful rooms that nobody uses. It's almost like forgotten. The time has forgotten it.
Yeah.
And I think when Laurie moves in, he kind of like, I think he livens it up. He's 15 is when he moves in.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, this is why I think the adaptation should have Laurie's point of view, how he was only living in a boarding house somewhere in France or Italy, England.
Yeah, I don't remember. I think France.
Maybe France.
I don't remember. They make a big deal about how he can speak French.
There's a big contrast between the March family and the Lawrences, and we can even see that in the way they live. So when Laurie moves in with his grandfather, he feels very, very out of place. And then Joe comes and, be my friend. Let's be friends. So he kind of sees Joe as his savior.
Which may be why later he gets stuck on the idea of getting married to Joe.
Exactly. And maybe it's more like him wanting to pay back her or something.
It's a good theory anyway.
Have you ever heard from Aunt March and Mr. Lawrence shippers?
No, but it seems like something people would ship. Sometimes they have their moments. I don't know if this was actually in the book, but I think in one of the movie adaptations, he like asks her to dance at Meg's wedding and she's just kind of like, and like walks away or whatever.
I think they dance in the 2017 miniseries.
Do they? Okay.
I thought that was interesting when I first heard about it because I had not heard about it before, but I think people come up with weirdest
just want to ship anything.
Yeah, people ship anything.
Yeah, they're the two old people.
Mr. Lawrence is so much nicer than Aunt March.
He is.
I wouldn't like to be Joe working for Aunt March.
No.
She did like Amy, so she liked somebody.
No, that's a new one. Mr. Lawrence and Aunt March shippers.
Apparently there is a ship for them.
That's funny.
In your version, when we have Meg trying to fit into the popular girls. Like she's a cheerleader, and then Sally Moffat is also a cheerleader and her best friend.
Yep.
She's nominated to be a prom queen. Meg
and Sally, I think, both.
Yeah.
And then another girl.
I don't really know about proms because we don't really have them here.
It's one of those things that feels so big when you're in high school. And then when you're an adult, at least for those of us who weren't into prom, you look back on it and think, why was that such a big deal? But it is to a lot of teenagers, especially the popular group who's going to be involved in it.
And it was nice that in your version, Meg's glove was actually a pom-pom.
Oh, yeah.
That was funny. I like that.
Hey.
Yeah.
I kind of thought that was funny too.
That was one of those things where you can see how Meg is kind of struggling with her sort of high school reputation and then wanting to be with John, who is really an outcaster. We have this like a teenage TV series here in Finland about a popular girl who falls in love with the most nerdiest guy in high school. So that kind of reminded me of that.
Yeah.
That series.
That sounds like a cute series.
It is. And honestly, like the girl in the series, she's a bit more like Amy. She loves pink and very girly and bit immature, but also quite sexual, I'd say. And the guy is super nerdy. He's really cute, but he's very nerdy. And then the girl is so wrecked when everybody finds out that she likes the nerd, and she loses her reputation, and there's all this drama. Like it kind of reminds me of your book.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you are this popular in high school, like Meg is, there are things that you lose when you fall out of that clique. You won't be saved seats. You won't be invited to these social gatherings. You won't be. You become invisible, I guess. Or you will be bullied. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, that very well could happen too. No, in my story, I didn't have to deal too much with the fallout because it was at the end of the year and they were all graduating, and there was some of that with the prom stuff and also kids I don't think really look to the future very much. They don't really see what's happening past next week, a lot of them. So even though the whole high school was coming to an end for my characters, the whole social thing still was very, especially for the maid character, very important to her. Whereas as adults, you and I can look and say, okay, in a month, this experience won't matter.
Well, she remembered when the family was wealthy or wealthier, and they could have all these nice things and they had more money to spend, that she got invited to this social gathering of young girls. It was exciting for her, and she did want it to belong to that crowd.
And Jo didn't even want to go. She kind of was forced into it.
So yeah, I think that's why Meg has longing for that time when things were easier, because she also knows what people are saying about her family, that there are these gossip about her father, how they are abolitionists. And I mean, he used to be a teacher, but then his school was
shut down, yeah,
because he took a black child there,
which would have been a huge social deal then.
Yeah. So they were really shut down almost by their former friends. Meg really suffered that a lot because she remembered what it was. And Jo doesn't really remember that. And the other sisters.
They were little, very little. I don't know why Jo doesn't remember much, because she's not much younger than Meg, but maybe just she didn't, because it wasn't something that she would have cared about.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have stuck in her mind as much as other things.
Or maybe for Joe, it was more like the other people are attacking them, and she doesn't understand why.
Yeah, maybe.
But Meg, she understands why and how things are enveloping. So maybe that's why it was a big deal for her.
Probably.
Mm.
Well, and the other two were quite young, so they wouldn't even have memories of that.
I liked in your book when we have these moments when Meg is sort of trying to figure out who she is and what she wants from life. Because I think that's one of those things in Meg's character that are really important in the original novel. How she starts to form her own identity, but then she really struggles to find the things that are important to her because of this social pressure that's has huge impact on her. I think it has a bigger impact on her than Joe and Amy and others.
Yeah, it's almost like she's grown up thinking that this is exactly what she wants, and then all of a sudden she realizes maybe what she's always thought she's wanted isn't actually the best things in life to strive for. But yeah, she is still, and well, like we said, she is the one who remembers what it was like to live a different life with more money and more invitations to these these gatherings and hanging out with richer people and all that. So yeah, I remember not really putting it together as a kid, but as an adult, it really struck me how when she comes home from the Vanity Fair, she basically tells her mom and Joe everything that happened and all the stuff that she didn't like about being with those girls and those people and the gossips and the what people were saying. There was a lot of that she didn't really like, but as a kid, all I remembered was, the dressing up and the ball, the fun and all that.
Yeah, and then there was the rumor that Meg's mom had been planning Meg and Laurie to marry, and Meg was so angry about that. And Mommy was really angry about it. I think there was some of that in your novel too, that, oh, she's after the Lawrence boy.
Some of the girls at the sorority where she goes, which is the Vanity Fair in the book, are like assuming because she's friends with them that she's trying to be interested in marrying in or dating, I guess it would be in this day and age. Because when you're 17, you're probably not going to be making marriage plans.
Then in your version, she also wanted to be part of a sorority in college?
Sorority, yeah.
Sorority, yeah.
So that's what the Vanity Fair ended up translating to. It was in my book, it's like a preview day of the various sororities that she goes to and thinking, oh, this is what I've always wanted to be in my whole life. And so excited to check that lifestyle out. And then, as in the original, she comes away from the experience thinking, oh, well, there's some good, but some maybe not so good. And kind of reevaluating her idea of what it is and if she really wants to be a part of it. My name is Jen Brady, and I'm an author. I have in the past published several books that are more middle grade in nature, and a couple of years ago, I decided to branch out into young adult sweet romance, and the first project I took on under this new genre to me was a retelling of Little Women. So I have 4 books, and there's one for each of the sisters. You can read them independently. You don't have to read one before the other, but if you read them in order, there are threads that kind of weave along the whole series. So it's best to read them in order, but you don't have to. And I just had a lot of fun adapting Little Women for 2021.
One of my friends on Instagram, she had read some of your books, and I told you that you are coming back, and then she sent a question.
Oh,
yeah. She's
cool.
asking, what did you especially focus on when writing the Meg and John relationship in this century?
Well, I guess it was the social aspect, because so much was made of the wealth versus the poor in making the matches in the original, and how so many women were wanting to or having to marry for money, and how Meg kind of chose not to. She married for love, and in this day and age, yeah, that still can be something that happens, but women have a lot more opportunities now. They don't have to be told that they need to consider that kind of thing. So, well, the money issue was kind of in the book. It was more the social aspect of the popularity and the, can this person get you where you want to be in life, and that kind of thing, rather than the money. So I guess I focused mainly on the social aspect and what the friends think, and what your social circles are going to say if you date someone who is maybe out of your social circle, that kind of thing, because I see that a lot in teenagers and social media and high school life. And I think that is kind of a tough issue, maybe more so than some of the things that were involved in the original book.
I think the social aspect was also important in the 19th century, but they definitely put way more weight on how wealthy the person was.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, like you said, there wasn't that many opportunities for women to have a job at all. So it's kind of makes sense that you had to marry someone who could provide to you and your family.
Yeah, definitely.
When I was reading your book, I did feel that it translated very well to this century, because you brought the story to high school world, where reputation is very important, and there are all these different social classes in high school in the same way that there is in Little Woman. I thought it translated very well to this particular story.
Well, thanks. I kind of thought that it was the easiest one to adapt. Some of the other ones, I kind of really had to think hard about, what would that look like in our time. That one, it pretty much kind of fell into place. There were a lot of really easy parallels.
Yeah, like Meg going to Vanity Fair.
Yeah.
That's pretty easy to put into the context of trying to be popular in high school. I would like to ask you, when did you begin writing?
I have old notebooks that you can barely read because my printing is so bad, because I'm in like second grade, that are basically fan fictions of various Saturday morning cartoons that my friends and I used to like to watch. So,
I love that.
Yeah, I've been interested in writing and creating stories, and even what I did here, adapting or kind of expanding the world of characters and stories that I already enjoyed. So I liked doing the fan fiction when I was younger, and as I got older, I started creating my own stories, and I just kind of never stopped writing.
What other fandoms you like beside Little Woman?
Big one for me growing up was Star Trek. My mom loved Star Trek, the original series. So when I was old enough, I never really got into that one, but I loved The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. And I still, every now and then, I'll go back and be like, okay, I'm going to watch a season of Star Trek. So I was real big into science fiction and fantasy. Star Wars is another one. I don't know why people think you have to have a favorite or choose between them, because they're both awesome. My husband and I have just been recently into The Mandalorian and the Boba Fett, and now we're waiting for our son to have some time so that we could all watch the new Obi-Wan Kenobi one. Mm-hmm. So I was into a lot of science fiction and fantasy fandoms.
My sister's a massive Star Trek fan.
Well, there's so much Star Trek.
Yeah.
So you can go down that rabbit hole for days.
She only agreed to watch the 1978 Little Woman because it had William Shatner.
Oh, that's funny.
But she did like it.
Oh, I thought of one other fandom that I was huge into. I still like, but as a teenager, oh my gosh, North and South, the miniseries.
Oh yeah.
And I kind of watched that for the same reason as your sister, because Jonathan Frakes, who was on The Next Generation, he was one of my favorite actors on that. He was in North and South. And so I started watching North and South. And then I think it was like 30 minutes into it, I was in love with that fandom. And my friends and I also wrote fan fiction about North and South. So.
I think we talked about this a little bit the last time, that perhaps John is not that popular as Laurie and Frederick because he's more introverted than he's extroverted.
Yeah, I would agree. He's not one that really stands out on your first read or your first viewing of the movie as much as maybe the other men, but I've always really liked John. He just kind of seems like a strong, maybe that strong and silent kind of type. Yeah, he's not as much focused on in things either. Well, he really wasn't well, that's not true. I was going to say he wasn't in Little Women, the original book, as much, but when you read the second half, The Good Wives, there is quite a bit of John, and then he's in some of the sequels too. So he's there. He just, yeah, he isn't as, I guess, exciting, but I don't know. I thought he had some really good qualities too. So I've always kind of been a fan of him.
When I read Little Woman as a child, I didn't really pay that much attention to him. But then when I read Little Woman more as a mature person, in Camp Lawrence chapter, there's this moment where he tells this story, or they are like telling the story together. You know that play where you make up something, and the other continues.
Yeah, and they each told their own little paragraph, and
it's a story about a knife that goes to save a princess, and John's princess is Meg March.
Yeah, he's pretty cool.
And I thought, when I read it for the first time, when I realized what I was reading as a teen, I was like, that's kind of racy.
Yeah, from back then it kind of probably was.
Because Meg was 17 and he was maybe 27, 28. There was some kind of an age gap there as well.
Yeah.
It was pretty normal back then, so I don't think it's appropriate for the time period.
Yeah. And they didn't even bat an eye at it, it didn't seem, because they would talk about Joe and Frederick having a big age gap, but no one ever said anything about Meg and John, even though, you know, they had 10 years or 8 years or whatever. But yeah, that was pretty common.
Louisa May Alcott, she had a thing for older guys.
Guys, yeah. And I think as a kid, when I was reading Little Women, and maybe this is where he kind of gets lost in the shuffle, you're more focused on the kid characters, the teenage characters, and he's always an adult. So maybe that's why he doesn't make as much of an impression, especially on our first read throughs, because a lot of times we're kids or teenagers when we first read the story.
I think in the chapter Camp Lawrence, there's also the moment when he is rowing the boat with Meg, and then Laurie's, his cousins, the rich cousins. No, not cousins, friends.
Friends, yeah.
From England. The girl is like, what are you doing for a living? And Meg is like, I am a governess. And then she's like,
oh, you have to work.
Yeah. Why do you have to work? And
right.
John is like, I think being a governess is a really cool thing. And I just later on realized that, well, they're both teachers.
Yeah, they are. I liked how he kind of swoops in and tells, is it Kate? I think her name is Kate. The
Kate
snobby sister. Yeah, the snobby sister of Fred. You know, maybe it's different in England, but here it's looked up to if you can go support yourself, and working isn't a bad thing. He really valued that Meg was helping her family and a hard worker, and kind of went in and was talking about that to get Kate off her back almost.
That was one of those moments that really made me fall in love with John's character later on. But yeah, I think he's more of an introvert, and with Beth maybe, and then the others to be more extroverted.
Yeah, I think so. And that's probably why he isn't as focused on, but he's still a great character.
Did you use your own high school, college memories when writing this book?
Maybe a little, but I was not like Meg at all. I was more of a shy Beth. I was never in with the in crowd or doing things like going to prom, and I guess I was more like the John character, not really feeling like I fit in high school, and I was quiet and liked to read. And so maybe you're right, and I did draw on my high school experiences. I'm just now realizing, but it wasn't for Meg, it was for the John character.
You know the movie Mean Girls?
Yes.
When they go through all the cliques in the high school scenario, and then they go to the art students. That's where I was.
Okay. It's a good place to be too.
Yeah, that's why I didn't like school that much. But when I went to art school, there was no cliques because we all came from that.
All art students. Yeah. Yeah, high school wasn't my favorite time at all. It wasn't like a horrid experience or anything. I wasn't like horribly bullied or anything like that, but I just didn't really feel like I fit in there. I found my friends, my true friends in college and also at summer camp. I was real big into summer camp, and that's actually what I wrote about for my first series for 10, 15 years. That's kind of what I worked on, books about summer camp, because that was more my things that had made an impression on me and the place where I'd had really good times.
I never went to summer camp.
Oh, you should have. It was so fun.
Well, I had fun time in art school. That's okay.
Yeah. I bet it's probably very similar in the whole finding people that you have things in common with. Like you said, there aren't cliques anymore because everybody loves art and has the same kind of viewpoint. That's kind of what camp was.
That's true. I was thinking, what does Little Woman, the original novel, tells about John's background? Because I don't think it tells that much.
All I remember is he took care of his mom or something. It kind of alluded that she might have been elderly and ill or something. I kind of went with the having to take care of the mom, but in a different way with addiction and stuff like that, rather than, because they really don't say much. You don't know. It's kind of a mystery, but that's basically what they say. And that he might have had a brother maybe in the original.
I've written to my notes he had ill mother who he sent money to, and maybe a brother.
Yeah, I don't think they really got into the backstory very much.
It's the same with Fredrik's character, only that he had a sister who sadly died, and two nephews.
And the nephews. And
John went to war, and in your version, he's planning to go to the Marines. Was that right?
National Guard.
National Guard.
Which is because I wanted him to be able to be accessible for other books. If I would have sent him off to the Marines or the Army or something, he'd be gone. So I did National Guard because they have their regular boot camp and stuff, but then they live basically civilian lives, but they have training I think it's once a month they'll have a training. And
okay.
But
so in your version, John's mom had addiction with alcohol. He came from a very poor background, and he tried to fake to his friends and everyone else that he came from a normal home. And then we have Meg also trying to fake to her friends that she enjoys being the popular it girl.
Yeah, because in the Meg Goes to Vanity Fair, a lot of times what they focus on is, oh, Meg dresses up, and Meg, they almost make it out that, oh, she's having fun and this is great and this is what she really wants. And she did want to, run with that crowd, but she also realized things she didn't like about it when she's being talked about and when she's just realizing, I thought I wanted to run with this crowd, but maybe there's some negatives too. So I tried to kind of focus on that in my book, the discovering who you are, and maybe that's not what you thought you wanted in life when you mature and grow up a little bit.
I think that's a huge theme in Little Woman in the original book as well, that the things that you want as a teenager are not necessarily those things that you want as an adult.
Yeah, definitely. You can see that in a few of the different storylines.
Yeah.
In Louisa May Alcott's.
Jo says that her castle in the air is to write books and own horses and be filthy rich. But then in the second book, there's the chapter All Alone.
She realizes she wants companionship and
she wants
someone to have a life with.
Exactly.
She still does want to be a writer, and she does write, but I think she's happier with the life that she ends up making for herself than the life that she maybe imagined as a 15-year-old.
And I think what Meg wanted, she wanted to be popular and have nice things.
And rich, and she wanted to be like her friends and throwing the balls and buying the expensive fabric and keeping it, and the pretty dresses and the servants and all that.
And then in the second part, she no longer wants those things.
No, she just wants to be wife and mom and her own little family, and it seems like she's pretty happy doing that.
It is a big part of Little Woman storylines. Then you had Laurie making pranks.
That was one of my favorite parts in the original, and they don't often adapt that, but they did in my introduction to Little Women, which was the cartoon from Japan in the 80s. I distinctly remember the episode where Laurie is doing the back and forth letters. And one of the reasons I remember it is because they changed the name on the paper. They called him Carl or something. When the people were speaking, they said John. And then when they show the letter in the cartoon, it says like Carl or Kevin or something at the bottom. And my friend and I would always rewind it. And the character says, as she's reading it, your servant John Brooks or something, but it clearly says a different name, and my friend and I always thought that was hilarious, so we'd rewind that part in the tapes that my grandma would tape for us. So I distinctly remember this prank part, and it's never in the movies, and I'm always disappointed. So I wanted to make sure that I adapted the prank of the fake letters to and from Meg and John. Only now it's 2021, so it was texting, of course.
Mm-hmm. When I read your book, I thought this is the language is something that I could imagine him to use. He wrote in a way that Meg could recognize that wasn't written by John.
Yeah.
But it's worse in the original because Meg actually thinks that the letters came from John, and she even replies to them.
Yeah.
So it's really a vicious thing that he does in the original, but nobody speaks about it. Well, I do, but nobody else really seems to do that.
There's a few parts that really stuck out to me, either from the cartoon or the original book when I was younger, that like have stayed with me. And now when I read it, I get to that part, I'm like, oh, that's one of my favorite parts. And they don't often pick it to do the adaptations. Like one of my other favorite parts is the Amy and the art fair. So I made sure to put the art fair in my fourth book, which is the Amy book. But they never have the whole art fair debacle with the rival artist who gets her table. And it really shows how she's grown as a character, because she handles that disappointment pretty classy.
Yeah.
Whereas Amy from the first book, Little Women, rather than Good Wives, or is that in I can't remember. The younger Amy definitely would have not handled that well. She would have kicked up a fit and freaked out, and older Amy was very gracious, and I always liked that part, and they never put that in any of the adaptations. The pranks and the art fair are the two big ones I can think of that I wanted to make sure got in there. So
That is the benefit of creating your own version, that you can add the things that you want to have there.
True.
Another thing that they never add is the symposium with Joe and Frederick, which is one of my favorites in the novel.
Is that in the Winona Ryder one?
There's something similar when they meet and they have the discussion about philosophy.
Yeah. And he kind of cuts in and says he thinks women should be able to tell their opinions. Yeah, but it's just like a 30-second scene probably. Yeah, you're right. They never do put that in. Oh, yeah, in the 1994 film, they kind of show that, but yeah, you're right. They never show it in full. And I think that's the only one I can remember having it in.
Yeah.
The symposium part.
In the 2017, he invites her to the symposium, but then they don't include the symposium, and it makes me so angry.
Is that the miniseries?
Yeah, the miniseries.
Like PBS was like it was two or three episodes or something. Yeah, I liked that one. I've only seen it once though, so I don't remember that one as well as some of the others.
Oh, the Hollywood people bring the symposium to the Little Woman adaptations.
Yeah.
Please. And thinking about the art fair, I think they should also include that or something like that, because if I remember right, there are these moments there where Amy and Laurie are a bit flirtatious in the book. Mm-hmm. Why that is not in the movie?
I don't know. Well, I mean, I've always said they need to do a good old-fashioned, like we were talking about North and South, 80s miniseries where it goes on for like 6 or 7 days for 2 hours a day. They need to do something like that with Little Women because it's such a massive book and 90 minutes or 2 hours just isn't enough time. I mean, I had trouble putting everything in to 4 different books that I wanted to fit in. Some things had to just fall by the wayside. And that was 4 different books. So I'm sure that the time restraints make it so that they can't, but man, wouldn't it be great to have an actual long mini series that you can fit all these fun little lesser known scenes into?
I would love that. And I have the whole idea that they should include like Laurie's point of view and then Frederick's point of view and his life in Berlin. Oh, I'd love that.
That would be fun. That was something that was fun about writing the book. I ended up doing 8 viewpoints in the end, 2 per book. So it was kind of funny to write from the John point of view or the Laurie point of view or the Friedrich, because I think we mainly get Joe's and then a little bit of Meg and Amy in the original.
Yeah.
But not, it's all kind of under the lens of Louisa May Alcott, which is great. She's a great writer, but it kind of all, I don't know, it was like all under one viewpoint. And I always kind of wondered, what these other characters thought. What does Beth think about being the peacemaker of the family? Is it exhausting? Or is it, someone's coming into my room. Sorry.
It's all right.
My husband and my cat just walked in, so just wait a minute.
Waving back. I was thinking about the 1949 film. There's this moment where Laurie is like, why do you need to work, Joe? Do you need money? I have lots of money. Like, he doesn't really understand why the girls have to work. And
right.
I think I saw some of that in your book as well, because Laurie is unproductive and he's lazy because everything has been handed over to him.
He doesn't have to work and he doesn't have to really try for anything. And I think when you grow up like that, you don't really understand. You can't really comprehend that there is another way of life for other people.
I liked your book because it showed clearly that how John is blown away when he enters the Lawrence home, and then he lives in the trailer park. He's really poor. But I think in the original book, it does mention how the girls are really poor and how John is very poor. But sometimes I feel like the modern readers don't really pay that much attention to the differences.
It's hard for us to realize, because as modern readers, we see, oh, they have a maid, or oh, so they don't have a carriage. Well, big deal. I bet a lot of people didn't have carriages, but it's hard for us to get what the constructs of the social class were back then, because to us it's all foreign.
And most of us come from middle class families.
Yeah.
So it's difficult to put yourself into that position, because you don't see that in your everyday life.
Whereas for us now, it might be like, oh, your family can't afford a car, or tech. Tech is a big thing, probably. So I tried to put it in terms that people would understand nowadays, like, oh, you can't afford a phone, or that kind of thing. It is hard for us to immerse ourselves in the world of the 1800s and to know what would show that you had money or didn't, or that is a tough thing to figure out as we're reading the original.
I also understood why John had to lie about his background, because when you were in high school, you don't want to stand out too much from the crowd, I think.
Right.
Like,
no one wants to really be different.
Yeah, you want to blend in and not have people pay too much attention to you. In your version, John and Meg, they meet in the drama class.
Oh yeah, that's another thing that they don't adapt very much. That Meg really wanted to be an actress, and she loved acting. And they'll show like Joe's plays and the Christmas scene where all the kids fall through the couch because there's too many people sitting there, and Amy's messing up her lines and not fainting right. But they don't really center around the fact that Meg was really into acting. So I tried to kind of put that in.
They show bits of their plays in the movies.
Mm-hmm.
I think in the 1994 film, they do mention that in 19th century, being an actor, it was seen a bit suspicious as a career. When I read some of these books that Louisa May Alcott liked to read, like Wilhelm Meister and like other German type of literature, Goethe, he criticizes life of actor. Google locked me out and I had to log in.
Oh no, jeez, come on, Google. Don't you know that people want to talk about Little Women for more than 40 minutes at a time?
Yeah. They should know my habits already.
Yeah, they should.
Louisa May Alcott, she sometimes kind of criticizes actors' life, like in Joe's Boys. I think Maggie's still like acting, but she still prefers to be mom and doing those homely things. But I was thinking maybe it's because of that sort of bad reputation that the actors had back then. Maybe that's why she didn't become a full-time actor.
Maybe. I mean, it's still not something that like a parent would be thrilled to hear. I want to be an actor.
My mom wasn't very happy when I said I want to go to art school.
One of our kids wants to go to art school.
My sister, she's an actress in an improvisation theater.
Oh, okay.
But she never wanted to make that her full-time job.
Right. It's like a fun thing that you do.
Yeah. It's like a creative outlet for her.
Yeah. Oh, I get it. Because with writing, when it was just a hobby, I always had ideas and couldn't wait to sit down and write. And now that I'm trying to, make a writing career, and you look at the numbers and the money, and sometimes it can be a little daunting to sit down and actually come up with something, because it's just so much more pressure. I think that's why it's taken me this long to finally, after finishing the March Sisters series, get back into really the groove of writing. I had several months where I was organizing my house and purging things from the closet and scraping paint off of our outbuildings so we could paint them. And a lot of that was, avoiding having to sit down and come up with another world. So I get that. It's hard when your artistic endeavors merge with career.
Meg is not the only one who have these questions, because then we have Jo, who really struggles with her writing career.
Mm-hmm.
In the second part of the books, she wrote those trashy novels.
Mm-hmm.
And then when Fredrik came, she started to take herself more seriously as a writer.
It's hard to find a balance between right to market and writing, what you really love to write and what you feel drawn to writing. But if you're going to make a career out of it, it has to sell. So yeah, it's not something just from Jo's time. It definitely influenced me wanting to change genres and do the young adult romance, because it's popular. The key is finding something that's popular that you really want to write, like Little Women adaptations. It was so much fun that I didn't mind doing a popular genre.
When you enjoy it, that's the best part. In 19th century, if you were an actor, and then if you would like to combine that with a family, that might not have been so easy.
I'm sure it wasn't. I'm sure those kinds of careers are hard now too, and we have, more quicker and more reliable forms of transportation, and we have the internet, and we have Zoom, and I'm sure it seems like it's really hard now, but I can't imagine back then, when they didn't have any of these forms of communication and travel, it would have been almost impossible for someone like Meg to have a family and a acting career.
Sometimes I come across these people who complain that Meg doesn't become an actress. When I read the book, I don't think she's that much into acting. I think she cared more about having a family.
Yeah, I think so too. And also, how many times do we say as a kid, "Oh, I'm going to be an actor," or "I'm going to be an astronaut," or "I'm going to be a whatever"? And most of us, when we're older, don't end up being an actor or an astronaut or some lofty goal that very few people in this world actually end up doing. So
I wanted to be an archaeologist.
Oh, that sounds really fun. I have a friend who actually is an archaeologist, but she's the only one I know who is.
Yeah. And I was really very close to applying to university to go to study archaeology, but I ended up going to art school.
Okay.
But, maybe someday I could go back.
Either one sounds good. Yeah, you definitely could.
Yeah, if I would want to, but not so much now.
Yeah.
I still like history, and doing this podcast, that's one of those things. Like when you're a history nerd, this is a really good podcasting to do. Louisa May Alcott's life.
And what you do is kind of like archaeology, because you're looking into all these sources, and with the Louisa May Alcott's letters and all the things written about her, and okay, now what were the times like?
When you read the original, you said he was funny, but then also annoying. I think there is some kind of this sort of thin line when funny becomes a bit annoying. Yeah. Especially when you're a teenager.
Yeah, I think so. There is a fine line between being funny and crazy and goofy and taking things too far. And I think especially with teenagers, it's easy to cross that line, especially when you're with your friends or there's people you want to impress. We all have that one friend that we can really get into trouble with. And I think that was Jo and Laurie were each other's one friend.
And it's funny in the original when he's composing the opera in Vienna after Jo has rejected him. There's this moment when he calls Jo a torment. And I was like, when you call her a torment, why are you pinning on her?
Right.
For that, I think it was the art fair chapter. There's this moment when Laurie is really frustrated when Joe is preaching him about about college.
Yeah, because he kind of he was like going to gambling rooms or whatever and being wild.
Sometimes it's just mind-blowing to me that people want Joe and Laurie together because
I know
Laurie has a crush on Joe, but then he also thinks Joe is a torment, and he is so annoyed with Joe. Laurie doesn't like Joe always that much. I think there was some kind of a need to have Joe in his life because he needed someone to tell him what to do with his life.
Yeah.
But when I was reading your book, I thought it was interesting because there were some moments when John makes these observations that Laurie goes to do these things that Joe wants to do that he doesn't want to do himself.
Because he just wants to, be with her and do stuff she wants to do.
He watched films that won Academy Awards.
Yeah, the movies that she wanted to watch that he thought were stupid.
Stuff like that. And it was very close to the book. I kind of feel sad for Laurie because I felt like he was wasting his time on Joe. Then I feel bad for Joe because he was really like pinning on her when she didn't want his attention.
Yeah, it's not romantic. There's not much romantic about their relationship. That's why I loved that cartoon, because they were very clearly friends and had like a brother and sister kind of relationship, and they fought in that cartoon. And I remember a scene where Laurie gets mad at her and comes into his house and is like kind of huffing and puffing and like throws his hat at the door, and it clearly shows that they drive each other crazy but are still very dear friends, which is pretty common with a close friend, brother sister kind of relationship. But yeah, so when I was watching the movies as a teenager or a kid, I didn't understand that either. Like, why? Because from what I read and seen in the cartoon, I'm like, why is this like a love thing when they never really were?
One of my friends said that it's not really a love thing. It's actually Laurie that he just wants to have sex with her.
Oh.
Maybe there is some of that.
But I think it was more, maybe, I don't know, but I think it was more like he just felt like he belonged in the family and loved the whole family. And nowadays you can be an add-on to a family in any way, shape, or form, but in those times I think you added on by getting married, and so that was kind of the logical progression.
Because when Laurie proposes Joe, it feels like he feels a lot more immature than Joe in that scene. Because he says these things like, I gave up billiards and all to be with you.
Yeah, he gets a little silly there.
It's a really funny line when he says that. It's such a bad reason for Joe to marry him, that he just wants to like play house with her.
Yeah, and it shows how he's grown up and been handed everything. So he's like, well, but I did this. That was probably a lot of work for him. Wow, I gave this up. I gave something up. This is big stuff. And she's not reacting the way he thought she would. Everything else is, I want this. Okay, here you go.
Yeah.
And I think he didn't know what to do or how to act when he doesn't get the thing he says he wants.
I think I already mentioned this to you. I really like the part where Meg says that Joanna has learned to control her temper better recently when she has started to date the other guy.
Oh, yeah.
Not the Lawrence boy.
Not that one, the Frederick character. One thing that was different from mine is that in Louisa May Alcott's, Joe is the very last romance. Yeah. But with mine, I wanted Joe, because everyone kind of thinks of Joe when they think of Little Women. So I wanted to start things off. She's kind of the more exciting character, usually. So I wanted to start off with her, but then I ran into the issue in the future books. Wait, he's already here. So how do we work Friedrich in to the other storylines? So that was interesting to have to figure out.
I thought it was nice how you can see them now through these other characters from their eyes. The way Meg sees how good he is to her.
Mm-hmm.
Meg sees her sister becoming this person that she's meant to be because of this other guy, how he helps her. And I really look forward to read the Amy and Laurie book now. And the Beth book too.
The Beth one was definitely the most challenging one because there's no backstory. There's nothing in the original. Just here's Beth. She's shy and plays the piano and has cats and dolls, and now she dies. So it was a lot more kind of going on a character outline than a fully formed character and relationship. So that one I kind of had to do a lot more original story for than I did the other ones. There's so much Amy and Laurie in both Good Wives and Little Women that then for my last book, it kind of made up for having to make stuff up because there was so much to draw from.
I look forward to read both of them. Yeah, Beth is interesting because it's kind of funny because when I read the Finnish version, I got this impression that she had a crush on Laurie. But when I read the English one, I wondered, like, did she have a crush on him or not? Because I think maybe it was the translation that kind of romanticized him in her eyes a bit more than the English one. But then I read that Louisa May Alcott had a secret admirer, or that she had a crush on someone. So I was like, maybe my childhood Laurie and Beth romance had some kind of base on reality.
Maybe.
That was interesting.
I just always thought that Jo thinks Beth has a little crush on Laurie. And then later she finds out it was because she kept staring out the window and she thought that Beth was staring after Laurie and she was quieter and more flustered. And so she was seeing all these signs of having a crush or being in love. And later Jo, I think it says that Jo realizes it was because Beth was realizing she was not going to get better.
True.
And it was kind of more the coming to terms, I guess, with her mortality.
I read that Lizzie Alcott had a crush on some neighbor boy and that Louisa May Alcott thought that she was in love with somebody.
I didn't know that part, so that's, well, maybe.
When I read the Finnish version as a child, and I thought, okay, maybe Beth has a crush on Laurie. Now I think, okay, maybe that was validated. But then I read the English version. I didn't feel that she had a feelings for Laurie that were romantic, only like sisterly feelings. Very interesting.
Yeah, it is. All kinds of fan fictions we could have here.
Yeah. And just that she did have a crush on somebody. I will look forward to read your book. Beth is a very mysterious character.
She is, because there's just not a lot about her.
Some of the research that I've read about Lizzie Alcott, it feels very one-dimensional, but maybe it's because people tend to read her through Beth's character.
Probably.
Do you have a favorite Meg on movies or Little Women adaptations?
Well, I love almost everything about the 1994 one. So I like that actress. I also really liked the Meg in the modern adaptation movie.
The 2018.
Yeah, I really liked her.
Those two are good ones.
Yeah, those two I think are my favorite Megs.
I think Trini Alvarado in the 1994 film is maybe closest to the book Meg.
She did play it pretty close to the original.
She has that quiet strength that the character
needs. She does.
One thing that I liked in the modern version is the way it kind of shows how the family was very religious. Meg, she goes to parties, she drinks, but then she also has these very conflicted feelings about being there, being part of the social crowd and the popular kids there. It kind of played on her fate, that adaptation. That version made very clear that their father was like a pastor.
Religious, a chaplain.
And the family was quite different to the other people in the town. When I grew up, my best friend came from a very religious family. So I kind of felt that she had some similar experiences when we were growing up.
Okay.
She always felt guilty after she drank something like alcohol, or even if she smoked, like she always felt really guilty afterwards. So maybe the March sisters would have been like that because, in the book, they don't like to drink, and they have some pretty strong views about Laurie when he smokes cigarettes.
Right, goes to the billiard place.
Yeah, all these things that were not seen very appropriate back then.
Right.
So I can see Meg feeling quite conflicted by those things. There's one thing that I really love when I read Little Men again. There's this moment where Fredrik says that he stopped smoking because he wanted to show good examples for the students. Okay. And I really like that.
I didn't remember that part. That's interesting.
It's funny because Jo is so not happy with Laurie when he smokes, but she doesn't have problems with Fredrik smoking.
That is funny.
They say that love makes us blind.
Yes.
That was funny. Laurie gave up smoking for Jo, or he says he did. But Fredrik gave up smoking for the students, apparently.
The students, yeah. Well, and I think that also goes back to how people see the mothering aspect, how Jo would kind of mother Laurie.
That's
so
true.
She would want to be telling him what he shouldn't do, and Fredrik, what she was never trying to be a sisterly or motherly role with. No. He can make his own decisions, but she's gonna tell Laurie what he should not be doing.
Yeah, that was so fun to read.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. That is funny.
Yeah, last time I read it, I highlighted all the Fredrik parts so I can make it to the podcast someday.
I haven't read Little Men very many times. I've read Little Women over and over and over and over, and I like Little Men, but I just haven't read it maybe once recently, because I wanted to kind of know where that went as I was writing mine, and then once when I was younger. But I don't know it nearly as well as I know Little Women.
Yeah, I've read Little Men many times when I was younger, but I haven't really read it as an adult. Now I have read it a couple of times for the podcast.
I liked in Little Men just seeing the grown sisters and their husbands interact, and how they're still friends, and how Laurie is still the fun uncle who comes in and riles them all up and then is like, well, bye. Jo is stuck trying to calm them down for bed or whatever. Stuff like that I found funny.
Well, Little Man is also heartbreaking because we lose John in that book.
I know. I saw as I was reading it, because I didn't remember much about it at all when I read it when I was younger, and I'm reading it, and I think the chapter is named John Brooke or something, and I'm like, oh no. Oh no, no. And that's what it was. And I'm just like, no, we can't lose him.
And he was such a good character and a father. And there's this funny moment when Fredrik says that when he and Laurie got married, they would ask John for marital advice.
Oh, okay.
Somebody write a book about that.
Yeah, we need that. We need that episode. What would he say?
Do men even ask about marital advice? I don't know.
Right. I don't know either.
I want to read that.
I just want to know what he said. Someone needs to write that.
But he had been married for the longest.
You'll have to do a Little Men podcast sometime.
Yeah, I'm now doing these readings of the different chapters in Little Woman. But at some point we will move into Little Men after we have done Little Woman.
When I have free hour or whatever, I need to go and listen to the last one you posted with all the questions. Those people's questions. I've been wanting to listen to it since you posted it, but it was the last week of school and graduation, and I went and helped out with a friend's parents' funeral luncheon, and then my husband was off school, and all these appointments for the kids that we pushed off until summer so that we wouldn't have to take them out of school. So it's been kind of crazy, but I need to remember to go back. I kept the email because I'm on the mailing list I'm like, as long as I keep the email in my box, I'll see it when I'm randomly scrolling down, trying to clean it out. And I'll be like, oh yeah, that. I still have to go back to that and listen to it because it sounded interesting.
It was fun to make, and people make really good questions that I don't really think myself when I do the podcast. So it's always really fun to make those Q&As.
Well, I have some outside work to do, so maybe I'll put it on my phone while I'm doing my outside work today.
Yeah, I always try to listen to a podcast when I'm doing the dishes or something.
Or laundry or something.
Yeah, something. Something to keep me busy.
Multitasking.
Yes. I wanted to ask more about John's character. Would you like to tell how you started to develop him?
I think I've written so many books, and the way that I come up with books with stories, I think a lot about the stories before I ever sit down to write, and I write out of order. A lot of people sit down and they start with the first word of chapter 1, and the last thing they write is the last word of the last chapter, and then they go back and edit it. But I don't really write that way, so I skip around, and if I have an idea for, oh, I think this would be a funny scene, or oh, this is an important conversation I want to get in, I'll write that part. So I write the pieces and then I put it all together. That's kind of a hard thing for me to answer because I don't sit down and a lot of people will sketch out their characters, like this is what they look like and these are their characteristics and this is their backstory. But for me, it kind of comes from the interactions or the conversations or the important pieces that I think of and then get down first, and then I kind of fill the rest of it in. I can't really give you a good answer to that. Kind of what I did was, or watching the adaptations and reading the original, I would make note about things that the original character did or said or his backstory, and then I just kind of, as I was writing, kind of tried to incorporate those and modernize them and add a little bit of my own flair, which kind of came together. Each draft, my characters become more concrete and more well-rounded because I am kind of fleshing it out. My first drafts are not very complete. It's a lot of conversation and banter and a little bit of description, and then I go in and layer them until the books end up longer and with more subplots and characters become more real to me. So I guess that kind of answers your question.
It was a good answer. You start to shape the character from the conversations.
I might come up with ideas later and then I have to go back in and make it consistent. Oh, this character likes whatever. Well, now I have to go back in and make sure they like that team or food or whatever from the beginning to the end. I guess my characters kind of develop along with the plot and the theme. And
I was thinking how in your story, John's mom is an alcoholic. And then I think in some Louisa May Alcott stories, there are some characters who could be described to be alcoholics. In Rosie Bloom Charlie, he does have a drinking problem. Somebody commented, I think maybe it was some Little Women discussion group, that they are convinced that Louisa May Alcott knew someone with a drinking problem based on Charlie's behavior.
Well, that for me kind of developed because I wanted to figure out how to get him, my John character, to be living at the Lawrences. And if you had a stable home, you wouldn't think, oh, maybe I should go live with these people I'm working for, because you would just drive the 5 minutes to work for them and you'd go home. So partly I knew I wanted him to have an unstable family life to get him to be in a position where he would be living there. So he would be next to the Marches and kind of having that little brother relationship, having Laurie kind of as a little brother as well as a tutor who he was, or a tutee, I guess. So that was kind of where that started. In the book, his mom had been sick, the original, and you wouldn't up and ditch your mom if she was like, oh, I have cancer or I have whatever. It had to be more of an emotional, mental addiction kind of thing to facilitate him wanting to move in with them. So that's kind of, I think, how I ended up working that in.
Yeah, I think if John's mom would have been like deadly ill, he would not have left her. He's that kind of a character.
I had to make him want to leave.
I wonder, do you think Laurie might have had some kind of ADHD or problems with focusing?
Maybe.
Yeah. When I read Little Woman last time, I felt that he really struggles to focus on one thing at a time. Like, I hear sometimes people say that Joe has problems with that, but I think Laurie has them even more.
Yeah, but if Joe is interested in something, she will for days obsess over that.
Yeah.
So I don't think she pays attention to what she wants to. Yeah. I wonder if Laurie did have some kind of a attention deficit. She's always looking for any kind of a distraction almost.
I do feel that when I read the book, like the whole sequence of him is trying to decide if he wants to be with Joe or with Amy, it feels the same. Like he cannot focus on composing the opera when he dreams about one girl and then he dreams about the other girl.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't have had any kind of words for that back then.
No.
Labels, or you would just kind of be seen as kind of spacey, probably.
Maybe an undiagnosed ADHD.
I wouldn't be surprised.
In your version, he really had struggles with school. That's why he needed the private tutor.
It was kind of almost more like he didn't care. You got to stay on task, kid.
After he was rejected by Joe, I think he said to his grandfather that the whole college was like labor lost or something.
He was trying to be the person that she would want.
And it didn't work.
No.
It's kind of sad. Maybe he should have gone to study music or something. He went to have internship with his grandfather after that, in the original.
There's so much in that book. We could read it over and over and over and still get something new.
That is
Every
true.
time I read it, I do. I notice something that I didn't notice. Seems like it works out all right for everyone in the end, except for poor Beth.
So in your version, Laurie's mom was a musician and his father was also a musician.
His mom was a music teacher and his dad is like a famous musician in mine.
And his grandfather didn't like his mom.
Didn't want her to get involved in all that stuff. But she was kind of being a typical teenager and a little whimsical about, we were talking earlier about, becoming an actor isn't really something that any parent would love to hear, but, I want to be a musician. Following a famous band around probably wouldn't be something that you'd want to hear your child say either.
Probably that's why Laurie wanted to be more involved with music, is because he felt connection to his parents. Thank you so much for coming here.
Oh, thank you for having me. I always like talking with you.
Yeah.
You always have some insight that I've missed in Little Women.
So do you. I always enjoy to hear your thoughts.
Well, thank you. And I'm glad you enjoyed the second book, and I hope you enjoy the third and fourth.
I believe I will. Thanks for coming here. And I will talk to you again later. Have a nice night. And no, have a nice day. I'm going to have a nice night.
Yes, you have the nice night, and I'll have a nice day.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. That was our discussion for today. Thank you so much for listening. Take care and make good choices. Bye.